This is a hobby author publishing presentation, where my hobby is your entertainment. Welcome back to Shadows of Secrets. The horrifying truth is known. The Shadow Myster is Rix, a man twisted into a monster by Gerrod's own mother, Elysia. Her ambition and cruelty seem boundless. Yet, in the heart of her darkest laboratory, she left a message, not of power or domination, but a simple flower from a shared past, and a cryptic promise to guide the lost son when the stars align. Today, in Chapter 14, A Mother's Message, Gerrod and Ace must follow this mysterious trail. Is it a trap, a trick, or the first step on a path to understanding the woman behind the monster?
Chapter 14, A Mother's Message. The oppressive weight of the catacombs clung to them like grave shrouds as they finally emerged from the cellar passage back into the grimy alleys of the old temple district. The night air, though thick with the familiar stench of Oswegonia, refuse, coal smoke, unwashed bodies, felt thin and sharp compared to the stagnant depths below. Stars glittered coldly in the sliver of sky visible between leaning tenements, distant and indifferent. Gerrod tucked the fragile scroll bearing the Moonpetal Bloom sketch carefully into an oilskin pouch, securing it within his tunic. The pendant beneath still emanated a faint, steady hum against his skin, a constant, tangible reminder of the path laid before him, a path leading back towards the snow-capped peaks guarding Verdant Haven. Hope, fragile as the sketch itself, warred with a deep, abiding dread that settled like frost in his bones. Could the mother who pressed flowers into books truly be reconciled with the mistress Raven Shadow who forged monsters in desecrated shrines? Was this trail a desperate lifeline, or the most insidious thread in her web? He felt balanced on a knife's edge between longing and terror. Ace spat into the gutter, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. His face was set in grim lines, his eyes scanning the shadowed doorways and rooftops with ingrained suspicion. Right then, he grunted, adjusting the axe beneath his cloak. Verdant Haven it is. High meadows, pretty flowers. He gave Gerrod a hard look. Just remember whose garden we're walking into, lad. Keep your eyes open and your hand on your steel. This ain't no bleedin' nature walk. Gerrod nodded, the wordless understanding passing between them. They would follow Elysia's trail. They had to. But they would walk it with shields up and weapons ready, few bracing for the chilling possibility that the lost son was being guided not towards reunion, but sacrifice. They lingered in the relative anonymity of the alley, the towering, lightless buildings offering a temporary shield from prying eyes. Gerrod pulled out the small scroll again, unfurling the Moonpetal Bloom sketch under the faint starlight filtering down. The pendant beneath his tunic hummed steadily, a low thrum against his chest. He found himself holding the pendant just above the parchment, almost unconsciously. As he did, the resonance intensified. The smooth wood grew subtly warmer, and the intricate lines of the sketch seemed to shimmer, almost imperceptibly shifting focus. It wasn't just a drawing. The pendant's magic reacted to it, drawing his attention to the specific arrangement of the overlapping petals, the curve of the stem, the number of tiny leaves depicted. He looked up past the jagged silhouettes of the rooftops to the cold, distant stars scattered across the ink-dark sky. Suddenly, the connection snapped into place, sharp and clear as a struck bell. The arrangement of the moon petal's components wasn't random artistry. It was a celestial map. The central bell shape mirrored a familiar, bright star. The overlapping petals corresponded perfectly to the positions of adjacent constellations visible right now, forming a specific, recognizable pattern low on the eastern horizon. And the cryptic note, when the stars align. It wasn't a vague prophecy for some distant future. It meant tonight. Ace, Gerrod breathed, his voice tight with urgency. It's not just a flower. It's the sky. Tonight's sky. He held out the sketch, pointing towards the celestial pattern it mirrored. She wants us somewhere in the city, somewhere with a clear view of this alignment, right now. The trail didn't lead straight out of Oswegonia. The first step was here, tonight, guided by starlight and a flower from a lost home. The urgency gripped them. Dawn wasn't far off, and the specific alignment wouldn't hold forever. Which way? Ace growled, already scanning the labyrinthine alleys for the quickest, least conspicuous route. Gerrod held the pendant aloft slightly, closing his eyes for a moment, filtering out the city's cacophony. The distant shouts, the rumble of carts on cobblestone, the ever-present stench of decay, and focusing solely on the subtle, directional hum vibrating through the wood. It pulled faintly, persistently, towards the northeast, towards the higher elevations of the city. He matched this internal compass with the celestial map sketched on the parchment, aligning the Moonpetal constellation with the actual stars visible above. Northeast, he confirmed, pointing towards a narrow gap between two leaning warehouses. Towards the old Citadel district, I think. Higher ground. They moved like shadows themselves, melting into the deeper darkness of side alleys and drainage ditches. Ace took the lead, his centuries of navigating Oswegonia's underbelly guiding them through shortcuts Gerrod wouldn't have known existed. A loose grating leading through a sewer overflow, a treacherous climb up crumbling masonry to cross a guarded street via the rooftops. The city felt tense, watchful. More watch patrols than usual seemed to be out, their lanterns casting sharp, probing beams. And deeper in the shadows, Gerrod occasionally caught unsettling movement. Shapes that detached themselves from darkened doorways, figures that seemed just a bit too tall, too silent. Myster's eyes? Had Terrell talked, or had their probing simply stirred the nest? Gerrod focused on the necklace's steady pull and the silent guidance of the stars, trusting Ace's instincts to keep them unseen. Each step deeper into the sleeping city felt like walking further into his mother's intricate design, the destination unknown, the path fraught with unseen watchers. The necklace hummed faintly, a consistent guidepost pulling them northeast through the sleeping city's veins. They scaled a moss-slick wall, dropping silently into the overgrown courtyard of a derelict temple. The Moonpetal constellation climbed higher, its stellar counterpart blazing cold and clear above the jagged rooflines. The pendant's pull strengthened slightly, drawing Gerrod towards a thick curtain of ancient ivy cascading down one crumbling wall. Hidden within the dense leaves, almost invisible unless you knew precisely where and how to look, was a small, though intricate knot tied with a specific twist Gerrod recognized instantly. It was a Verdant Haven wayfinder's knot, one his mother had painstakingly taught him as a child, used by rangers to mark safe paths through treacherous woods. Seeing it here, amidst urban decay, felt jarringly intimate, a secret language whispered across years of silence. His breath hitched. Pressing onward, the trail led them past a cracked, dry fountain in a deserted plaza. Here, the pendant pulsed again, guiding his eyes not towards the fountain itself, but to a loose cluster of 5 smooth gray river stones arranged near its base. They looked random, debris scattered by time. But the pattern, 3 close together, one slightly apart, the last offset at a precise angle, mimicked a game they used to play with pebbles gathered from the streams near their home, a simple counting game Elysia had invented. Another echo, another shard of shared memory deliberately placed. Further along, near the shuttered window of a spice merchant's shop, the pendant guided him not by sight, but by scent. A faint, elusive fragrance lingered in the air, cutting through the usual miasma of stale beer and refuse. It was the sharp, clean aroma of silver pine resin mixed with dried sun moss, components Elysia used in salves and incense, ingredients gathered only in the high forests surrounding the haven. No city spice shop would stock such things. It was another marker, ephemeral but undeniable, speaking directly to his senses, to his past. Each discovery tightened the knot of hope and dread in his chest. This wasn't just a trail. It was a curated journey through his own memories, laid by the woman who knew him best, for reasons he desperately needed, yet feared to understand. Ace moved silently behind Gerrod, his own senses on high alert, scanning the rooftops and shadowed alleys for any sign of trouble. He let the half-elf lead, trusting the strange pull of the pendant and Gerrod's unnerving focus on the stars above. But Ace watched his friend just as closely as he watched the surrounding threats. He saw the way Gerrod stopped dead by that curtain of ivy, his hand tracing something hidden within the leaves, a fleeting expression crossing his face, something sharp and painful, quickly masked. Ace recognized that look. It was the same tightening around the eyes Gerrod got when talking about his exile. By the fountain, he saw Gerrod kneel, staring intently at a handful of scattered stones, his shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly before squaring again with resolve. And near the spice shop, Gerrod had paused, inhaling deeply, a flicker of something akin to bewildered recognition softening his features for just a moment before the familiar, cautious mask returned. Ace frowned, rubbing his beard. This wasn't like tracking a smuggler or following guild signs. These markers felt intimate, personal. Each one seemed to land like a small blow on Gerrod, dredging up memories the half-elf usually kept locked away tighter than a dwarven vault. Ace didn't pry, didn't ask. This was Gerrod's ghosts walking, and the dwarf knew enough to give him space, even if the whole setup made his own skin crawl with suspicion. He kept his distance, a silent, watchful guard, letting Gerrod navigate this path paved with his own past, while Ace kept his eyes peeled for the inevitable knife hidden in the shadows of sentimentality. The scent of silver pine and sun moss lingered, sharp and clean, a phantom of the high forests clinging stubbornly to the grimy city air near the spice shop. For a moment, the reek of Oswegonia faded, replaced by the crisp scent of mountain air, the feel of rough bark beneath his fingers, the sound of wind sighing through high branches. He saw his mother's hands, nimble and sure, grinding the resin, her voice soft as she explained the properties of each herb, sunlight reflecting like gold in her hair. A wave of warmth washed over him, so potent it almost buckled his knees. A memory of safety, of belonging, of simple love. Then the illusion shattered. The warmth vanished, replaced by the damp chill emanating from the cobblestones, the stench of the alley rushing back to fill his lungs. The hands he remembered grinding healing herbs were the same hands that penned instructions for binding shadow essence, the same hands that sketched the horrifying diagrams in the desecrated shrine. The soft voice was the same one Terrell described as iced honey, giving orders that led to the creation of the Shadow Myster. A knot tightened in Gerrod's chest, stealing his breath. How could both be true? How could the woman who taught him the language of the forest, who pressed moonpetal blooms between pages with gentle care, be the same cold architect of so much darkness and pain? Each marker, each breadcrumb from their shared past, felt like both a caress and a blow. It dredged up love, warmth, a longing for the mother he remembered, only to slam him back against the monstrous reality of Mistress Ravenshadow. He clenched his fists, knuckles white, struggling to reconcile the ghost of love with the specter of betrayal. The path she laid wasn't just stone and shadow, it was paved with the shards of his own heart, and following it felt like walking barefoot on broken glass. Yet he pushed the turmoil down, forcing himself forward. Answers lay ahead, however painful they might be. The pendant's hum grew stronger, pulling them out of the deserted back alleys and towards the slightly more populated thoroughfares bordering the old citadel. The Moonpetal constellation was nearing its zenith, casting stark shadows. The next marker, Gerrod sensed through the pendant's guidance, wasn't tucked away in some forgotten corner. The pull led towards the base of a statue in a small moonlit public square, a place offering little cover. As Gerrod located the faint carving, a specific elven leaf pattern half hidden by grime on the statue's plinth, Ace hissed a warning. Two figures detached themselves from the deep shadows beneath an archway across the square. Tall, unnaturally thin, moving with a silent, gliding gait that wasn't entirely human. Myster's hounds. Ace shoved Gerrod behind the statue's bulk, just as the figures paused, their heads turning slowly, scanning the empty square. They lingered for a heart-stopping moment before melting back into the darkness. Shaken, they pressed on, the pendant now directing them upwards, towards the rooftops overlooking the square. The final marker for this leg felt close. They scaled a rickety drainpipe, Ace testing each handhold before letting Gerrod follow. Crouching low behind a gargoyle, Gerrod spotted it, a single dried moonpetal bloom, impossibly preserved, tucked into a crack in the roof tiles, visible only from this precise vantage point, under the direct light of the aligned stars. Just as he reached for it, a patrol rounded the corner onto the street below. Not watchmen this time, but four of the Meister's silent agents, their pale faces upturned as if sensing unseen watchers. Ace flattened them both against the cold slate roof, barely daring to breathe until the patrol passed. The danger was escalating. Elysia's trail was leading them through the teeth of the enemy. The final marker secured, the impossibly preserved Moonpetal Bloom now safely tucked away with the sketch. Gerrod felt the pendant's steady hum shift slightly in character. The directional pull remained consistent, still urging them northeast, but it felt less like a beacon drawing them towards a specific point and more like a current carrying them along a broader path. The urgent need to find markers under the precise alignment of the stars seemed to lessen, replaced by a general sense of forward momentum. They descended carefully from the rooftop, leaving the square and its lurking shadows behind. The alleys here began to change subtly. The oppressive closeness of leaning tenements gave way to wider, cleaner streets paved with smoother stones. The reek of refuse and decay lessened, occasionally replaced by the scent of night-blooming jasmine spilling over high garden walls or the faint aroma of expensive pipeweed drifting from an upper window. The architecture grew grander, stone replacing rotting timber, ornate carvings adorning doorways instead of crude protective wards. They were climbing, leaving the city's grimy underbelly and ascending towards the more affluent tiers. The districts that sprawled closer to the imposing silhouette of the royal palace, looming against the pre-dawn sky. Ace moved with even greater caution here. Fewer random thugs lurked in these shadows, but the watch patrols were more frequent, better equipped, and the occasional glint of light off polished armor suggested private guards protecting wealthy estates. The danger felt different, less chaotic and desperate, more organized and watchful. Gerrod felt the change too, the air cleaner but somehow colder, the silence less empty, more observant. His mother's trail wasn't just leading him through memory. It was leading him steadily uphill, towards the seat of power in Oswegonia, towards the palace whose blueprints lay hidden in her safe house. The convergence felt ominous, tightening the knot of dread in his stomach. The ascent continued, relentless. Street by street, the squalor of the lower districts receded, replaced by manicured hedges, wrought iron fences, and the imposing facades of noble houses. The air grew cleaner, carrying the scent of damp earth from tended gardens instead of decay. High above the rooftops, the stark gray walls of the royal palace complex dominated the skyline, seeming to loom larger with every step they took. The pendant beneath Gerrod's tunic hummed, unwavering, its pull drawing him directly towards those formidable walls. He glanced at Ace, whose eyes were also fixed on the palace silhouette against the paling eastern sky. The pieces clicked together with jarring certainty. The Moonpetal Bloom, the memory-laden markers, the cryptic message. This intensely personal trail wasn't leading to some secluded meeting spot or hidden refuge. It was guiding him, step by deliberate step, towards the very target detailed in the meticulous heist plans found in his mother's safe house. The palace blueprints, the notes on guard rotations, the planned infiltration routes, it all converged here. The palace. Gerrod breathed, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. Ace, this trail, it ends at the palace, where she planned the heist. Ace grunted, his gaze sharp and assessing as he scanned the palace ramparts. Aye, fancy that. His voice was tight, laced with suspicion. Leading you on a merry trip down memory lane, just to point you at the biggest score in the city, he spat softly. Either she needs something inside that palace awful bad, related to Rix or whatever else she's cooking up, or this whole personal scavenger hunt is just a damned distraction. Keep the lost son busy while the real game plays out elsewhere. The convergence felt too neat, too suspicious. Was the personal trail a key to her plan, or just smoke and mirrors? The steady hum of the pendant intensified, pulling them towards a tall, narrow townhouse nestled amongst grander estates, its upper levels obscured by darkness. Unlike the sprawling mansions, this building seemed designed for verticality, culminating in what looked like a series of tiered rooftop levels shrouded in greenery. The pendant urged Gerrod towards a wrought iron gate set into a high stone wall surrounding the property, a gate choked with ivy and seemingly unused for years. The air here was still, carrying only the faint scent of damp earth and night-blooming flowers from the hidden gardens within. The palace walls loomed impossibly close now, their cold stone battlements stark against the first hints of dawn painting the eastern sky. Gerrod approached the gate, the pendant vibrating strongly, its focus narrowing onto the rusted upper hinge, almost completely obscured by thick woody ivy stems. Carefully, mindful of rusted metal and potential traps, Gerrod used his dagger to pry back the tough ivy. Tucked deep within the hinge mechanism, protected from the elements and almost perfectly concealed, was a small, flat object wrapped in waxed paper. His fingers trembled slightly as he eased it out. Unfolding the paper revealed the final marker, a single pressed Moonpetal Bloom. It was impossibly fragile, its silvery petals flattened but perfectly preserved. The delicate structure intact despite the passage of years. It was identical to the ones his mother used to press, identical to the sketch. He held the flower, a tangible piece of his past, discovered at the threshold of his mother's apparent future target. Stepping back, he looked past the gate, up towards the unseen rooftop gardens, and then towards the massive, silent royal palace, directly overlooked from this vantage point. The personal trail had led them here, to a perfect observation post, a potential staging ground overlooking the objective of the heist plans. The final, intimate clue locked inextricably onto the cold, political target. Ace peered past Gerrod at the pressed flower, then craned his neck to look up towards the darkened rooftop gardens hidden behind the gate and wall. He squinted, his eyes tracing the line of sight towards the royal palace battlements, now sharply defined against the rapidly brightening sky. A specific tower, a section of wall with fewer crenellations, a blind spot near a guard turret. Details swam up from his memory of the intricate blueprints they'd studied in the Raven Shadow safehouse. 7 hells, Ace breathed, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. He nudged Gerrod, pointing towards a specific section of the palace wall visible between the shadowy masses of the rooftop foliage. Look there. That turret? Remember the schematics? The western approach? Observation Point Alpha, she called it. Clear view of the Emerald Tower postern gate and the Night Watch rotation changeover point. Gerrod's gaze followed Ace's gesture, his mind racing back to the detailed drawings, the annotations in his mother's precise script. Ace was right. The angle, the elevation, the unobstructed view of that specific, less guarded section of the palace, it matched exactly. This wasn't just near the palace. This series of interconnected rooftop gardens was the primary staging area, the vantage point meticulously detailed in her plans for the crown heist. The personal trail, paved with memories and intimate symbols, hadn't just led them towards the palace. It had delivered them directly to the operational heart of her planned infiltration. The final Moonpetal Bloom wasn't just a clue. It was the key unlocking the door to the exact location where her grand, audacious scheme was meant to begin. The convergence was absolute, chilling, and left Gerrod reeling. She had guided him, her lost son, straight into the nest of her criminal enterprise. Gerrod looked from the fragile, pressed Moonpetal Bloom in his hand, identical to the sketch, up to the vast expanse of the pre-dawn sky. The celestial pattern he'd recognized earlier, the one mimicking the flower's structure, now blazed directly overhead, sharp and brilliant against the deepening indigo canvas. The central star, the constellation petals, they had rotated into perfect, breathtaking alignment, exactly matching the configuration on the tiny scroll. Not close, not approximate, exact. When the stars align. The phrase from his mother's cryptic note echoed in his mind, no longer a vague prophecy, but an immediate, chilling reality. This alignment, right here, right now, was the moment she had specified. She hadn't just led him to this rooftop vantage point overlooking the palace, the precise staging ground for her heist. She had timed his arrival to this exact minute, using the predictable clockwork of the cosmos as her appointment setter. A cold dread washed over him, far colder than the pre-dawn air. This wasn't just guidance, it was orchestration on a terrifyingly intimate scale. She expected him. Now. Here. Was this the moment for a meeting? A confrontation? Or was his arrival, timed to the aligning stars, the trigger for the next phase of her plan, the crown heist itself perhaps, with him positioned exactly where she needed him to be? The silent stars offered no answers, only the terrifying certainty that he stood precisely where and when his mother intended, a pawn moved into position on her cosmic chessboard. The celestial clock had struck the appointed hour. The stars hung in perfect alignment overhead, silent witnesses confirming Elysia's precise timing. Gerrod felt a tremor run through him, not of fear, precisely, but of profound unease, the feeling of standing on a stage just as the curtain rises on an unknown play. Right on schedule, Ace muttered grimly, drawing his axe just enough for the polished edge to catch the faint starlight. He checked the throwing knives strapped to his thigh, his movements economical and practiced. Smells like a trap wrapped in fancy flowers, but we're here. He moved fluidly into the deepest shadows near the gate, positioning himself with his back to the wall, eyes constantly scanning the street behind them, the rooftops opposite, every potential approach vector. Gate's your dance ranger. I'll watch our backs. Shout if anything feels off. More off than this already is. Gerrod nodded, drawing a deep breath to steady himself. He slid the pressed flower back into its protective pouch, his fingers brushing the pendant. Its steady hum felt like a tether in the pre-dawn quiet. He loosened his longbow on his back, checked the accessibility of his quiver, and drew the hunting knife from its sheath, gripping the familiar handle. The personal journey was over. This was infiltration. He met Ace's watchful gaze across the small distance separating them, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Caution, readiness, and the shared understanding that they were stepping knowingly into the heart of whatever dangerous game his mother was playing. Turning back to the ivy-choked gate, Gerrod began assessing the lock mechanism and the surrounding wall, searching for the quietest way in. The old gate, rusted and seemingly fused shut, yielded surprisingly easily to Gerrod's pressed hand, deliberately maintained perhaps despite its derelict appearance. It swung inward with a low groan that seemed deafening in the pre-dawn stillness. Slipping through, they found themselves in a narrow, overgrown passage between the townhouse wall and the high outer stone perimeter. The air hung thick with the scent of damp earth, overgrown foliage, and the cloying sweetness of night-blooming jasmine. Ahead, a series of stone steps, slick with moss and partially obscured by tangled vines, wound upwards along the side of the building, leading towards the rooftop gardens. The ascent was treacherous in the dim light. Gerrod moved first, testing each step, using the shadows cast by overhanging eaves and decorative buttresses for cover. He moved with the practiced silence of a ranger, senses alert for tripwires, loose stones, or any sign of watchers. Ace followed close behind, his stockier frame surprisingly agile, his eyes constantly scanning the levels below and the windows of the townhouse itself. Though they remained dark and lifeless, they climbed past several landings, each offering glimpses into small, enclosed courtyard gardens choked with weeds and shadowed statues. Finally, the steps opened onto a wider, flagstone-paved terrace, the lowest level of the interconnected rooftop gardens. From here, the view of the royal palace was breathtakingly clear, its towers and walls seemingly close enough to touch in the rapidly approaching dawn. The pendant hummed insistently, confirming they had reached the destination Elysia intended. They were in position. Stepping onto the flagstone terrace felt like entering another world. After the shadowed climb up decaying steps, the rooftop garden unfolded before them, an oasis of unexpected tranquility suspended high above the awakening city. The pre-dawn light, a soft blend of receding moonlight and the first pearlescent hints of dawn, bathed the space in a gentle, ethereal glow. Flagstones, worn smooth by time and weather, formed pathways between meticulously arranged sections of greenery. Trellises heavy with pale, night-blooming jasmine framed the edges, their sweet perfume mingling with the damp, earthy scent of moss and rich soil. What dominated the space, however, were the flowers. Clay pots of varying sizes lined the low stone walls bordering the terrace, each containing specimens Gerrod recognized as rare, some native to distant lands, others notoriously difficult to cultivate outside specific environments. And interspersed among them, placed with clear intention, were several pots overflowing with healthy, vibrant moonpetal blooms. Their silvery petals seemed to capture and amplify the soft light, glowing faintly in the dimness. Seeing them here, thriving, deliberately cultivated in this hidden city garden, sent a fresh wave of conflicting emotions through Gerrod, the beauty jarring against the calculated purpose of this location. The garden felt secluded, shielded by high walls and clever planting from direct view of neighboring buildings, yet offering that perfect, unobstructed vista of the royal palace. It was beautiful, peaceful even, yet every element felt deliberate, placed. A serene stage set for espionage, overlooking the target, waiting for the final player, him, to arrive precisely on cue. Ace remained a statue of vigilance near the stairs, while Gerrod stood frozen, caught between the garden's quiet beauty and the chilling implications of its existence. Ace remained flattened against the stone archway leading from the stairs, axe held low, a study in grim vigilance amidst the quiet beauty. Gerrod took a hesitant step forward, the pendant beneath his tunic humming intensely, confirming this was the heart of the location, the destination his mother had intended. His gaze swept across the blooming flowers, the carefully placed benches, the clear, unobstructed view of the palace, and stopped. In the exact center of the terrace, silhouetted against the brightening horizon, stood a figure. Cloaked, slender, utterly still, they faced away from them, looking out over the royal palace with an air of quiet contemplation, seemingly oblivious or entirely unconcerned by their arrival. The lines of the figure, the specific drape of the dark cloak, even in the dim light. Gerrod knew that stance. He knew it with a certainty that bypassed thought, a primal recognition that resonated with the humming pendant and the ache in his own chest. His breath caught, lodging painfully in his throat. After the years of searching, the descent into darkness, the trail of painful memories, she was here, waiting. Elysia. Gerrod stopped dead at the edge of the terrace, the flagstones cold beneath his worn boots. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped within his chest. The gentle scent of moonpetal blooms and jasmine suddenly felt cloying, suffocating. There she was, not 10 paces away. Elysia, his mother, Mistress Ravenshadow. Architect of the monster haunting the city below. The silence stretched, taut and fragile as a spider's thread in the pre-dawn chill. What could he possibly say? Mother? The word felt alien. Inadequate. Why? The question was a vast, gaping wound, too enormous to voice. Should he demand answers about Rix, about the Myster, about the cold-blooded plans for the palace looming before them? Or should he speak of the pendant humming against his skin, the trail of painful memories she'd laid, the flicker of desperate hope warring with the certainty of her darkness? Her cloaked figure remained utterly still, facing the palace, seemingly lost in contemplation or simply waiting with unnerving patience. Was this the mother who pressed flowers or the strategist who sacrificed lives? Would she turn with warmth or with a blade drawn? He felt rooted to the spot, caught between the overwhelming urge to demand answers and the paralyzing fear of what those answers might be, of who she truly was beneath the cloak. He risked a fractional glance back towards the stairs, seeing only Ace's grim readiness in the deep shadows. This confrontation, however it unfolded, was his alone. The space between them felt miles wide, charged with unspoken history, love, betrayal, and the terrifying unknown of her intent. Ace remained a coiled spring in the deep shadows near the top of the stairs. He'd melted back further when the figure appeared, minimizing his visibility while maximizing his readiness. His hand wasn't just resting on his axe anymore. His grip was firm, knuckles white, the weapon angled slightly forward, ready for a swift, brutal swing. His other hand rested loosely on the hilt of a thick dagger tucked into his belt, his thumb stroking the worn leather almost absently. His dark eyes flicked constantly between the still, cloaked figure of Elysia and Gerrod's hesitant form at the edge of the terrace. Every line of the dwarf's body radiated tension and lethal intent. He didn't trust this situation. Didn't trust the woman who orchestrated horrors from the shadows. While Gerrod wrestled with ghosts and memories, Ace prepared for the inevitable treachery. His focus was absolute: protect Gerrod. If that cloaked figure made one wrong move, one gesture that even hinted at aggression, Ace would erupt from the shadows like a rockslide, fury and steel leading the way. He was the silent, grim insurance policy against maternal malice. The silence on the rooftop stretched thin, strained by unspoken history and the weight of monstrous truths. Elysia remained perfectly still, a statue carved from shadow, her cloaked back to them as she gazed out over the awakening palace. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the moonpetal blooms, the sound unnaturally loud in the profound quiet. Did she sense them? Had she known the exact moment their boots touched the flagstones? The air crackled with anticipation, a held breath before the inevitable storm. Her stillness felt less like ignorance, more like absolute control. Gerrod drew a shuddering breath, the cool pre-dawn air sharp in his lungs, carrying the incongruous sweetness of jasmine and the metallic tang of his own fear. The pendant hummed beneath his tunic, a low thrum against the frantic pounding of his heart. He couldn't remain paralyzed in the shadows forever. Steeling himself, fueled by a desperate need for answers that warred with profound dread, he stepped forward. Out from the relative concealment near the stairway arch into the soft ethereal light washing over the rooftop garden. The flagstones felt unnaturally cold beneath his worn boots, his gaze locked onto the slender, cloaked figure silhouetted against the brightening sky. Elysia. Still unmoving, still facing the palace. The silence stretched, amplifying the rustle of leaves, the distant city murmur, the blood roaring in his ears. Did she know he was here? The question felt absurd. She had orchestrated every step. The air crackled, thick with decades of unspoken history. Love curdled into something monstrous, hope flickering against overwhelming evidence. He stood exposed in the fragile light, the scent of Moonpetal Blooms thick around him, the royal palace looming like a silent judge. What awaited him now? Would she turn to offer the mother's embrace he subconsciously craved? Would her hand emerge, clutching a hidden blade, springing the final, most personal trap? Or would this tranquil garden, overlooking the awakening city, become the stage for a battle against the architect of nightmares, the woman who was his own flesh and blood? He stood exposed, waiting for the inevitable turn, bracing for the unknown storm.
The trail was real, a scavenger hunt of memory and magic, leading them through the sleeping city, right to the doorstep of the royal palace. The stars have aligned, just as Elysia's message foretold. She has guided Gerrod to the precise staging ground for her audacious heist, at the exact moment she intended. Why? What awaits him on that lonely rooftop? A mother's embrace, or a master manipulator's final move? The confrontation is at hand. Be here for the next chapter, Elysia's final act. The stars are aligned. Subscribe and don't miss what happens next.